I always knew that moving back to my family's old farm would stir up some dust. What I didn't expect was that the real mess would come not from the cracked irrigation pipes or the sagging barn roof, but from the wheels of a pearl-white luxury SUV. My name is Jake Morgan. I'm 37, freshly out of the corporate grind in Dallas, and the reluctant inheritor of Morgan Acres, 160 acres of Oklahoma pastureland passed down through 4 generations. After burning out on high-rise meetings and overpriced lattes, I came here for quiet. For space. For sanity. What I got instead was Karen Whitman and her niece, Candace. Now, when I say Karen sisters, I don't mean sisters by blood. Karen is the HOA president of Whispering Pines Estates, a luxury development that borders the eastern ridge of my farm. Candace is her younger niece who just so happens to be the HOA vice president in her echo chamber. Together, they were a twin-headed nightmare of pastels, SUVs, and HOA tyranny. The trouble started the way these things always do, subtle, sneaky, and just infuriating enough to question if you're overreacting. One morning in early spring, I was checking the lower pasture when I saw them, tire tracks. Deep, fresh, and slicing right through my rye crop like someone had decided my farm was their shortcut to yoga class. Judging by the width and tread, it wasn't a tractor or farm utility. These were high-end treads. SUV treads. I figured it was a mistake. Maybe some GPS glitch rerouted a delivery driver. I replaced the gate chain and moved on. But then it happened again. And again. A week later, 2 sets of tracks, this time cutting a wide curve past my cattle trough and over a newly seeded strip I'd just prepped for oats. That was my last straw. I installed a motion sensor trail cam hidden in a pecan tree and waited. The footage hit like a slap. 11:42 p.m., 2 white SUVs, an Audi Q7 and a Lexus GX, creeping across my land like they were touring a golf course. High beams off. No hesitation. They knew exactly where they were going. The Lexus plate matched a car I'd seen dozens of times turning into Whispering Pines. The Audi? I recognized that one too, Karen Whitman's niece, Candace. The next morning, I rolled up to the guard booth at the entrance to Whispering Pines. A kid barely old enough to shave leaned out of the booth. "I'm here to see Karen Whitman." "She's in a meeting," he said, after a short call. "Try the community center around 4. So I did. I waited out front with a manila folder under my arm. At 4:17 p.m., out came Karen Whitman. Blonde bob, designer leggings, oversized sunglasses. She looked like a lifestyle influencer at a spa retreat. "Mr. Morgan," she said, smiling like we were old friends. "To what do we owe the pleasure?" I pulled out the photos. "You've been driving through my land." She tilted her head. "Oh, that. Karen peered at the photos with the disinterest of someone inspecting a grocery receipt. "Jake, residents have used that service path for years. It's always been open access. It connects to County Road 19. It's practically a public easement. It's private land." "It's mine," I said evenly. "My grandfather closed that trail off in 1998. I've got the survey lines to prove it." Candace showed up a moment later, sipping something green from a stainless steel tumbler. She smirked when she saw the photos. "Relax," she said, "it's not like we're hurting anything. It's just a field. A field I work. A field that feeds my cattle. This isn't a walking trail." Karen waved her hand dismissively. "You don't understand the culture here. That trail is tradition. People rely on it. You blocking it is aggressive. Aggressive." The word echoed in my ears long after they turned their backs and walked away, already laughing about something else. So the next day, I put up a proper gate. Steel posts, reinforced lock, camera mounted to catch every angle. That same afternoon, I found a thick envelope in my mailbox, an official-looking notice from the HOA at Whispering Pines. It demanded I cease and desist the obstruction of traditional community access routes. It cited neighborhood goodwill and legacy travel expectations. It was signed by both Karen and Candace. I laughed. Then I threw it in the trash. But they didn't laugh back. Instead, they escalated. And that's when I decided, if they wanted to make this personal, I'd give them personal. And expensive. If you want to know the kind of person Karen Whitman is, consider this. She showed up at my gate the very next morning wearing a silk scarf and aviator sunglasses like she was about to step onto a runway. Behind her was Candace in a matching tennis skirt ensemble, arms crossed and scowl primed. "You've made a big mistake, Jake," Karen said, eyeing the new steel gate like it was radioactive. I didn't answer right away. I was on a ladder, tightening the bolts on a new solar-powered floodlight aimed right at the access trail. The camera was already rolling, audio and everything. I wanted it all documented. Karen adjusted her sunglasses. "You've obstructed a vital community route. This isn't just about you, Jake. It's about safety. Emergency access. Social cohesion." Candace chimed in, "There's already a petition going around. 42 signatures and counting. People are upset." "People who don't own this land," I said, stepping down from the ladder. "People who think a couple of tire tracks are worth more than private property rights." Karen smiled like a teacher about to scold a kindergartner. "You're new to the community. I get it. You probably don't understand how things work out here. But Whispering Pines has standards. And shared expectations. This farm has always cooperated." "That might have been true," I said, wiping my hands with a rag. "Before the people at Whispering Pines decided my pasture was their shortcut to Starbucks." I turned and walked back toward the house, leaving them to stew behind the locked gate. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. That Friday morning, I found the chain on my gate cut clean through. Not snapped. Not yanked. Cut, by bolt cutters or something just as heavy-duty. The gate stood wide open, swinging in the breeze. And there, like a cherry on top, were fresh SUV tracks winding through my field again. They were back. I pulled the camera footage. Midnight. A Lexus and an Audi, same as before. Candace in the driver's seat of one, Karen in the other. No shame, no hesitation. Just rolled them like they owned the land. Candace even waved at the camera. That was the moment I stopped seeing this as a nuisance. This was war. The next day, I installed a second gate at the far edge of the service trail. This one was reinforced steel, 12 feet wide, and secured with a tamper-proof lock that required a key and digital code. I posted legal signage: "Private property, no trespassing, violators will be prosecuted." Then I called Sheriff Landon. He'd known my grandfather. Used to fish with him on the far creek. He remembered the old gate. He remembered the land. "You got footage?" he asked. "Crystal clear." "Good," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "I'll log it as criminal trespass." "You want to press charges?" "I want to give them one more chance," I said. "Let them hang themselves first." He nodded. "You're more patient than I'd be." I didn't have to wait long. That Sunday, around 2:30 p.m., I was checking the feed from the gate cam when the alert chimed. Live feed popped open, and there they were again. Karen and Candace, both in sun hats this time, stepping out of their cars with thermoses and yoga mats under their arms. I stared in disbelief as they walked through the gate, Candace shimmying under the fence like some kind of suburban contortionist, Karen using a gardening glove to push open the latch mechanism from the inside. They crossed right into my pasture, high-fiving like middle schoolers skipping detention. That was it. I walked outside, calm as could be, and waited. 5 minutes later, they crested the hill near the eastern trough and froze when they saw me standing at the bottom in boots and a flannel, holding a clipboard and my phone camera rolling. "You're trespassing," I called out. "You've been warned. You've cut locks. You've entered private land after multiple notices." Karen took off her sunglasses. "Jake, don't be dramatic." I flipped open the clipboard, pulled out a document, and read aloud. As of this morning, an official restraining order has been filed with the county clerk, effective immediately. Karen Whitman and Candace Summers are prohibited from entering, crossing, or otherwise accessing any portion of Morgan Acres without explicit written permission. Karen's jaw dropped. I gave you chances, I said. I gave you warnings. You chose bolt cutters and yoga mats. Now we do it my way. They tried to argue. I didn't engage. I walked back to the house while they stood there steaming. That night, the HOA sent a letter, dressed up in legal language, sealed with their stupid embossed stamp, claiming I was withholding a necessary community easement and threatening civil action. I framed it and hung it in my mudroom next to the photo of my grandfather riding a tractor in 1964. Because that's when I realized, they weren't just entitled. They were arrogant enough to believe that land they didn't own, never paid for, never worked on, somehow belonged to them, just because it made their lives a little easier. But they didn't know me. And they definitely didn't know what was coming next. I've heard people say revenge is a dish best served cold. I don't know if that's true. What I do know is that revenge, when properly seasoned with planning, technology, and a little rural ingenuity, is better than any dish I've ever had. After I filed the restraining order, Karen and Candace vanished, for about a week. No SUVs. No tire tracks. No lavender-scented drama parading through my rye field. Then I started noticing things. Subtle, sneaky things. A drone buzzing overhead during my morning chores. Faint tire prints near the lower creek gate where no vehicles should be. A motion sensor light that had been unscrewed, its bulb dangling like a pulled tooth. I knew what they were doing. They weren't retreating. They were regrouping. So I set a trap. I moved my trail cams. Not the decoys they already knew about, the real ones. I buried 3 new motion-triggered cameras around the east and south pasture entrances, tucked behind thickets and fence posts. I even rigged a 4th to the back of a scarecrow I'd dressed in an old Carhartt and hat, just to see if anyone was dumb enough to get close. Then I waited. The first ray I'll catch came on a windy Tuesday night. At 11:43 p.m., one of the pasture cams lit up with movement. Grainy black and white footage showed a drone, hovering low over the sheep barn, scanning like it was doing a property appraisal. I watched on the monitor in real time as it dipped and turned, circling the pen like a buzzard with a camera. Next frame, a figure crouching near the gate. Tall, lean, ponytail bobbing in the wind, Candace. She was holding a controller in one hand, her phone in the other, completely unaware she was on a 1080p live stream to my laptop. I took a screenshot, time-stamped and GPS-coded. She was on my land. Again. 3 nights later, it happened again. This time, Karen joined her. They parked about 200 feet off the road in what used to be an old field entrance, now overgrown. I caught both of them slipping through the lower fence line, Candace holding a tripod, Karen carrying what looked like a picnic bag. A picnic bag. They set up under the pecan tree where the cows usually sleep. Candace was pointing the drone toward the barn roof. Karen was sipping from a wine tumbler and laughing at something on her phone. It was all there, recorded, tagged, and backed up in 3 places. But it was the next night, the night of the cow stampede, that sealed their fate. It started like the others. Drone buzzing. SUV headlights flicking off a minute too late. This time, I didn't watch from the house. I watched from 50 yards away, lying flat behind a hay bale with binoculars, dressed in camo and sipping bad gas station coffee. The drone hovered low, too low. It dipped, buzzed, then clipped the top of the barn roof before spiraling down like a drunk mosquito. Right into the west paddock. That paddock was home to Molly, a 1,000-pound longhorn with a short temper and zero patience for invaders. She took one look at the blinking plastic invader, lowered her head, and charged. The next few minutes were chaos. Molly barreled straight through the gate, spooked half the herd, and sent a dozen cows careening down the slope. In the distance, I saw 2 figures, Karen and Candace, sprinting toward the field like frantic wedding planners who'd just set the reception tent on fire. Karen tripped over a cattle fence and went face-first into a patch of burrs. Candace lost her footing and dropped her designer tote, which promptly got trampled by Molly on her second lap of destruction. I walked up slow, spotlight in hand, camera already recording. "Evening, ladies," I said, my voice calm, almost friendly. "Enjoying the tour?" Karen staggered to her feet, grass stuck to her lipstick. "This is harassment," she barked. "No, this is trespassing," I corrected, gesturing to the sign 4 feet away. "And you're on candid camera." Again. Candace tried to play it off, brushing her torn yoga pants and stammering about inspecting wildlife conditions. "You want wildlife? Try explaining that drone crashed to a judge after my Longhorn charged into a fence and nearly broke a leg. I'll sue." Karen screamed. "Please do," I said. "I've got 7 hours of surveillance footage, a sheriff on speed dial, and now footage of you actively causing a livestock stampede. And let's not forget the broken lock, the drone footage, and the wine bottle labeled HOA Executive Retreat." Karen looked like she'd swallowed a wasp. The next morning, I called Sheriff Landon again. This time, he didn't ask if I wanted to press charges. He asked how many. I handed over the footage. The screenshots. The timestamps. Even a close-up of Karen yelling at a confused cow like it had insulted her haircut. Landon shook his head. "These two think they're above the law." I shrugged. "Not anymore." By that afternoon, both Karen and Candace received official citations for trespassing, property damage, and unlawful drone surveillance. The sheriff himself delivered the papers, with a deputy filming the whole thing on a body cam. And I was sitting on my porch with a cold drink, watching the footage live. But I wasn't done yet. Because justice is good. But poetic justice? That's even better. The thing about truth is, it spreads. You don't need to scream it from rooftops or post it on every telephone pole. Just give it time. Let it marinate. And in a small town like Cresswell, where everybody knows everybody, time moves like a whisper with a megaphone. It started with a knock on my door. It was Troy Williamson, the local feed store owner. He stood on my porch holding a printout, brow furrowed, baseball cap in hand. "Jake," he said, "is it true that Karen and Candace got cited for trespassing on your land?" I blinked. "How'd you hear that?" He held up the printout. "Sheriff's Office updates. My niece works dispatch. Whole town's been talking about it since sunrise." That was fast. Troy looked me in the eye. "You know they've been pushing for that eastern bypass, right? Trying to get the county to approve a paved road through the edge of your property?" My stomach turned. "No. I didn't." He nodded grimly. "There was talk last winter. Karen pitched it at a town meeting. Said it'd improve community flow and emergency access, but we all knew it was just a shortcut for the Whispering Pines crowd. Less mud on their tires. So that was the endgame. The trespassing, the drone, the fake easement letters, it was all part of a plan to condition the town into accepting the road as inevitable. That made what came next even sweeter. Troy wasn't the only one who stopped by that week. I had neighbors dropping in with pies, casseroles, even a few bottles of homebrew. People I hadn't spoken to in months. They all came with the same message: "We're glad someone finally stood up to them." Turns out, Karen and Candace hadn't just been using my land. They'd been bullying half the town. Melissa from the bakery got fined for repainting her front door without pre-approved seasonal alignment. Her door was teal. Old Mr. Hennessy received 3 citations in 1 week for overgrown ivy, even though the ivy was on Karen's side of the fence. But nobody had the time, or the fight, to push back. Until now. Word of the drone footage spread like prairie fire. By the following Monday, the sheriff's office had to release a formal statement confirming that Karen Whitman and Candace Summers were under investigation for multiple incidents of trespass and property interference on private farmland. A formal hearing date was set. And the cherry on top? The footage. I'd never planned to share it. But Sheriff Landon said if I posted it publicly, it might help my case by generating witnesses to Karen's pattern of behavior. So I uploaded a 4-minute highlight reel, carefully edited for clarity and legal accuracy. I left out the profanity and edited around the cow stampede, to avoid triggering the animal lovers, but I kept the audio of Karen yelling, "Do you know who I am?" as Molly the Longhorn ran past in the background. The video? It went viral. In the span of 3 days, it racked up over 60,000 views on Facebook and was reposted on a local news blog under the title, "HOA President Tries to Commandeer Farmer's Land, Gets Chased by a Cow." People loved it. Comments poured in. Classic Karen behavior. I hope that cow got a bonus. She trespassed and brought wine? Why do HOAs attract the worst people? But the moment that really cemented the fallout was the town hall meeting. I didn't want to go. But after 3 different neighbors practically dragged me there, I figured I owed it to the folks who had supported me. I walked in that night to a packed room. Whispering Pines board members on one side. Local farmers and residents on the other. Tension so thick it hung in the air like summer humidity. Karen and Candace sat front row, flanked by 2 attorneys who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. When it was my turn to speak, I kept it short. My name is Jake Morgan. My grandfather built Morgan Acres from the ground up. I've spent the last 6 months repairing fences, restoring fields, and trying to protect what he left behind. I didn't want to fight. But I won't be bullied. Then I held up the still frame of Candace piloting the drone and said, "And I won't be surveilled like a criminal for protecting my land." Silence. Then applause. From the back row, someone shouted, "Tell him, Jake." Karen tried to stand, her face pale, jaw tight, but the mayor, old Rudy Jennings, cut her off. "We'll be reviewing Whispering Pines' recent actions. And we will not be moving forward with any easement or development that crosses into Morgan property. This ends here." I walked out of that meeting into the warm night air, feeling something I hadn't felt in months, peace. The sisters didn't speak to me after that. But they weren't done yet. You see, it's one thing to be publicly embarrassed. It's another to lose power. And what do people like Karen and Candace do when they start slipping? They double down. They dig deeper. And as I'd soon find out, they were about to make a mistake so big, so bold, and so unbelievably petty, it would make everything up until now look like child's play. By now, you'd think they would have learned. After public citations, viral humiliation, and a town hall meeting that put them in their place, any normal person would have backed off. But Karen Whitman was not a normal person. And neither was her niece. The HOA board had quietly stripped Karen of her presidential duties just days after the meeting. They called it a procedural rotation. But everyone knew it was damage control. She was still on the board, but now she was just another voice at the table instead of the queen on the throne. That should have been the end. But power doesn't let go that easily. Especially when it's built on fear and control. It was a Thursday, hot, dry, and buzzing with the kind of tension you feel in the air before a thunderstorm. I was halfway through fixing a busted fence line near the west pasture when I heard the roar of an engine behind me. Not just any engine. A throaty, too loud for no reason engine that didn't belong anywhere near livestock. I turned. There, barreling down the service road, was Karen Whitman's Lexus GX, kicking up a trail of dust like she was auditioning for a demolition derby. And right behind her, because of course, was Candace's Audi, fishtailing as it tried to keep up. They weren't slowing down. They weren't swerving. They were aiming straight for the new gate. I dropped my tools and sprinted. The cows near the fence bolted as the SUVs tore past the tree line, ignoring every sign, every lock, every warning. Karen's Lexus hit the gate first. The impact sounded like a shotgun blast, metal against metal. The frame groaned, then split, the padlock shattering into pieces as the steel hinges tore from the posts. Candace followed a split second later, skidding sideways and bouncing off the broken gate like a hockey puck off the boards. I stood frozen, mouth open, as both SUVs tore into the field and began circling like sharks. They didn't stop. They didn't even slow down. They just kept spinning, churning up rows of fresh rye, crushing irrigation tubing, turning months of hard work into a twisted brown smear. And then they stopped. Right in the middle of the field. Karen stepped out first, dusting off her designer jeans like she was brushing off a light inconvenience instead of committing felony-level property destruction. Candace followed, laughing. Actually laughing. "You don't control everything, Jake," Karen shouted across the pasture. "This land has always belonged to the community. We're just taking it back." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Because I already had them. I pointed to the tree line. 2 cameras. 1 drone. And Sheriff Landon's cruiser parked on the rise, lights already flashing. They didn't see him until he was halfway down the hill, tires crunching through the wreckage they'd just created. Karen froze. Candace backed up like she could somehow reverse time. The sheriff stepped out, calm as always, hand on his belt. "Ladies," he said. "Going for a joyride?" Karen tried to play it cool. "There's been a misunderstanding. We were inspecting the property for fire safety access. It's part of our community responsibilities." Landon raised an eyebrow. "Including ramming through a locked gate and tearing up someone's irrigation system?" Karen's smile cracked. "It wasn't locked." "It was," I said, holding up the broken padlock. "And I have the footage to prove it." He looked at me. "Want to press charges?" "Yes." He looked back at them. "Then this is where you call your lawyer." It wasn't dramatic after that. No screaming. No handcuffs on camera. Just paperwork, statements, and 2 very shaken HOA queens trying to explain how community harmony involved vehicular destruction. Later that day, the sheriff's office released the charges: felony trespass, property destruction, reckless endangerment. By nightfall, my phone was blowing up with reporters. Local ones. Then regional. Someone posted a screen grab of Karen's Lexus mid-crash with the caption, "From HOA to DOA, how power drove one woman off the rails." I didn't reply to any of them. I was busy reseeding my field and planning something better than any interview. Because while the Karen sisters had made their last drive, I was about to take my final stand. And when I did, it wouldn't just end their crusade. It would bury it, publicly, legally, and permanently. It's funny how justice can look like a wheat field. 6 weeks after the crash, the field Karen and Candace destroyed was finally showing signs of recovery. The new seedlings had taken root. The air smelled like earth again instead of scorched rubber and entitled rage. But the true harvest? That wasn't rye. It was reckoning. The legal wheels turned faster than I expected. Maybe because the sheriff was tired of Karen's nonsense. Maybe because the community had finally seen enough. Or maybe because the evidence I handed over, including drone footage, trail cam timestamps, audio of Karen yelling, "We're taking it back," left zero room for debate. Karen and Candace were indicted on 3 counts each. The felony trespass charge was the real kicker. Property damage alone was over $12,000, between irrigation, fencing, crops, and livestock containment. My insurance company was livid. Their adjuster filed a civil claim before I even finished my first cup of coffee that week. And that was just the beginning. You see, I'd spent the weeks since the incident doing what I do best, planning. I filed a private lawsuit. Trespass. Vandalism. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. I attached the full incident reports, damage estimates, and the signed HOA correspondence where Karen tried to force an illegal easement. The judge didn't just accept the case. He fast-tracked it. Meanwhile, the community was turning. Karen's name was removed from all HOA communications. Candace stepped down from her vice presidency. But the residents weren't fooled. Whispering Pines was on damage control, and the panic was showing. I started getting calls. Emails. Letters. from board members, residents, even Karen's husband, who hadn't been seen in public since the viral video made national news. They wanted a deal. They wanted peace. They wanted it all to go away. So I made them an offer. The Community Restoration Agreement, a document I drafted with the help of a sharp attorney from Tulsa, and let me tell you, it was a masterpiece. Here's what it included. A permanent easement reversal, legally binding, barring the HOA or any of its representatives from requesting access to or use of Morgan Acres for any purpose, ever. A full restitution payment of $24,000 to cover crop loss, repair, security upgrades, and community relations recovery. Public retraction, a written apology from Karen and Candace, read aloud at the next HOA meeting and published in the town newsletter. An HOA bylaw amendment, submitted by the remaining board, to permanently remove the president and vice president positions for misuse of authority. They balked. Karen threatened. Candace cried. But in the end, they signed. On a cool October morning, as the sun spilled over the ridge and my longhorns grazed in peace, I watched from my porch as Karen Whitman stood in front of 87 residents and read the apology she swore she'd never deliver. It was beautiful. Not just because of the words, but because of the silence that followed. Nobody clapped. Nobody booed. They just listened. And when she finished, she folded the paper, walked off the podium, and left the room like a ghost fading from her own story. That night, I poured myself a whiskey, walked down to the edge of the field, and stood beside the new gate. The cameras were still there. So were the signs. But the land felt settled. Like it had been scrubbed clean of their nonsense. I don't know if Karen and Candace will ever understand what they did wrong. People like that rarely do. But I do know this. They don't drive through my farm anymore. And they never will again. The real victory wasn't the money, or the apology, or even the reseeded rye. It was reclaiming something deeper: dignity, boundaries, peace. Because out here, land isn't just dirt. It's legacy. It's memory. And now, it's mine again.